I know I'm responding to one of the biggest racists on YouTube, but hey, sometimes it has to be done. That's what happens this time as I look at Franchesca Ramsey, host of MTV's Decoded, as she rants on about something she has clearly never thought rationally about. But rational thought isn't something we usually get from the political left, so let's get started.
Showing ID before you vote is no big deal. Everyone has ID, right?
Everyone should have ID. In fact, I don't understand how you can possibly be without it. You can't drive without an ID. You can't cash a check or open a bank account. You can't rent an apartment. You can't buy a house. You can't use a credit card. How do these people survive unless they work under the table and live under a bridge? You can't even get welfare without an ID. Franchesca, you're a moron!
In case you haven't noticed, the presidential election is almost here.
Actually, by the time I post this thing, it'll be long gone.
Soon, everybody can go to the polls and cast their ballots to decide the fate of America. Well, almost everybody.
Well, no, everybody who is legally able to vote and can demonstrate their eligibility. Now, I know that you and the rest of the political left hate this, but the only people who are eligible to vote are legal U.S. citizens. And you know who has to prove that they are legal U.S. citizens? Yep, the voters themselves. And how do they do that? By providing legal identification. But you know, personal responsibility and all gives you idiots the heebie-jeebies.
Since 2008, 10 states have successfully implemented strict voter ID laws that are meant to prevent voter fraud, but in reality, make it harder for a lot of people to vote.
Well, that's 10 down and 40 to go. But the left doesn't want anybody to be responsible for anything, hence they whine about it endlessly. I guess that's because they want illegals to vote, and they want to keep the dead on the voter rolls so they can keep casting votes for Democratic candidates. It doesn't make it hard for anybody who's responsible enough to vote.
3 of them make you show either a photo ID, like a driver's license, or non-photo ID, like a bill with your name on it, before you can vote at the polls. The other 7 will only let you vote if you have a photo ID.
And what exactly is the problem with that? It's called establishing your legal right to cast a vote. Why can't you figure that out?
So depending on where you live, what you need to do to vote in our national election can be totally different. America!
Yet not remotely unreasonable. America.
So why have these laws popped up recently? Well, in theory, they prevent voters from impersonating someone else. That way we can all feel confident in the accuracy of the election process without worrying that some kid is sneaking into the polls wearing mustache glasses. Yo, fake IDs, vote twice!
These are things that should have always been in place, but largely haven't been necessary in the past. The reason they're showing up right now is because you have people who are pushing for illegals to vote. It's because you have people who are constantly trying to tear down our national borders and open the ballot box to people who have no constitutional right to cast a vote. These laws are being proposed because your side makes them necessary.
But here's the thing. The kind of fraud voter ID laws claim to prevent practically never happens. In fact, a report concluded that voter impersonation is rarer than being struck by lightning.
No, it has little to do with impersonating someone else, although I suppose that could be a potential problem. In actuality, they stop people who have no right whatsoever to be in the country in the first place from casting votes that they are legally prohibited from casting, period.
Even FoxNews.com reported that this kind of voter fraud rarely happens. Wait, did I just agree with Fox News? Oh my God!
That's not relevant. These laws exist to stop people from doing what they shouldn't be doing. The fact is, your claim about what these laws are meant to do is simply wrong, which is no surprise whatsoever. Whether or not voter fraud is rampant has nothing to do with them making laws making voter fraud illegal. These laws exist, and they're gaining ground because the political left has been encouraging criminal voter activity. They are a stopgap measure against what the Democrats have been trying to push.
So why even bother having voter ID laws at all?
We've always had them in the form of the Constitution, and we've passed amendments to guarantee that voting is available to people of various racial, sexual, and age-based groups. But the most basic fact is that only legal American citizens get to cast a vote in this country. If you're not a legal American citizen, you have no right to vote. I know that's a shocking fact, but it's true. There are some people, for example convicted felons, who also lost their right to vote. You might not agree with these things, but it doesn't stop them from being so.
Good old-fashioned voter suppression with a dash of racism and classism for good measure.
Sorry, there's no voter suppression going on. Anyone who can prove they are a legal American citizen without an active felony on the record can go to the polls. Liberals don't like that anyone has to actually prove they're eligible. Liberals are idiots.
Requiring voters to have ID seems like a harmless precaution until you realize the majority of people lacking ID are either elderly, poor, and aren't white. And frequently, they're all three.
None of which actually stops you from getting an ID. The only thing that really stops you from getting an ID is laziness. And lazy people are almost certainly not going to vote in the first place. Whether you like it or not, you have to take responsibility for yourself in this country. And I know the left hates that word, but that's just reality.
Statistically, African American and Latinx voters are much less likely than white voters to have the qualifying IDs required by states with voter ID laws. They're also disproportionately likely to be low income.
So again, how do these people live at all? You cannot legally have a job in this country without an ID. You also cannot legally qualify for SSI or welfare without proving yourself to be a legal American citizen. So how do they get money? Work under the table? That's a crime. I guess Franchesca likes criminals to vote.
Even when a state offers free photo ID, these residents may not be able to afford the underlying documents, transportation, or time required to get one.
Cry me a fucking river. If they can't afford those things, how are they going to afford getting to the polling place? If they can't afford those things, how are they going to afford the stamp to stick on the envelope to mail in their vote?
Many Republicans pushing for voter ID claim the laws have nothing to do with race or class. But in 2013, North Carolina County Precinct GOP Chair Don Yelton told The Daily Show that if the state's new voter ID rule hurts a bunch of lazy blacks who just want the government to give them everything, so be it. Tell us how you really feel, Don.
While I don't agree with the racist undertones of that statement, as far as I'm concerned, if those who just have their hand out and want free stuff don't get to vote, I'm fine with that. Benjamin Franklin had it exactly right when he said, "When the people find that they can vote themselves money, that will herald the end of the republic."
They passed a law that imposed strict photo ID requirements on voters, in addition to ending voter registration outreach programs that historically increased black voter turnout. Thankfully, this past July, a federal appeals court actually struck down North Carolina's voter ID laws, claiming they targeted African Americans with almost surgical precision.
And they might have been, and in that case, they deserve to be struck down. That says nothing about the value of other voter ID laws, though, even though you want to pretend that it does.
See, voter ID laws are a classic example of structural racism, which is what makes racism different from prejudice.
No, you're just a moron. If anyone is racist here, it's you, but we already knew that. You see, she's assuming that all blacks are the same, which is a racist statement. Being black has no bearing on your economic class. You don't herd blacks into the back of the bus, well, unless you're one of the modern black advocacy groups. See, that's the thing. The poor blacks in this country have wasted the last 50 years listening to the liberals who don't want them to succeed because once they're successful, they tend to stop voting for the Democrats. The political left actively wants the poor blacks to continue failing so they get their votes. The political left does not now, nor have they ever cared about helping the poor black community to stop being poor. They want a slave class of dedicated voters. That's why they tell the poor that nothing they do is ever their fault. Tell me you can't see this clearly.
Prejudice is the individual dislike of a class of people based on a superficial characteristic or stereotype. Racism is racial prejudice plus structural oppression and power that negatively impacts a group.
No, they're essentially the same. You're just pretending that there's a difference because it helps your ideology. Inbred Jed who lives in the bayou can hate black people all he wants. He just has no power whatsoever to cause any significant harm. But he's still a racist, just like you are, Franchesca.
Structural racism often exists in the form of policies or laws that may or may not seem overtly racist, but ultimately cause negative consequences for people of color.
Yeah, not so much. But that's because you only see color. Because you're a racist. Now, do they cause problems for the poor? Maybe. But we specifically can't make laws that benefit one group to the detriment of another. regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, or economic class. We need to treat everyone the same. But the political left with their pet classes, they can't stand for that.
Pop quiz! What's the best way to make sure racist laws stay on the books and new rules aren't put into place?
You mean put you leftist assholes in power? Yeah, I don't think so.
Ooh, I know! Make it really difficult for people of color to vote! And that has a long history in America.
Well, but of course they can. They're just being held to the same standard as everyone else. You're the one trying to make a double standard, you racist imbecile.
After the Civil War, the 15th Amendment was ratified, making it illegal to deny a male citizen the right to vote based on race.
Hold on. We're talking about today, not 160 years ago. And I know the political left likes to live in the past, but we're not going there. Let's get back to the present, please, Franchesca.
So why does all this matter? Well, beyond ensuring every American has the right to vote, the key to ending structural racism is by replacing it with a better structure.
Okay, then come up with one. You idiots are great at complaining, but really, really bad at actually coming up with workable alternatives. Come up with something that allows legal American citizens to vote, but does not allow anyone who is not legally permitted to cast a vote. Go ahead. I'll wait. This ought to be good.
It isn't just about people changing their racist behaviors, although that's certainly part of it. It's also about reassessing the way those behaviors get written into the very laws on which our country stands.
Well, that only really applies when the Democrats get to write the laws because they're some of the most racist people out there.
And if you're not sure what you need to do to vote in your state, our friends John and Hank Green put together a great YouTube channel called How to Vote in Every State. You should also check out MTV's electthis.com to learn more about the election. We'll put links to both sites in the description box so you can make sure your voice is heard this November.
And that's the first and probably only good thing that Franchesca here has said. I want people to vote. Vote legally. Vote intelligently. Get out there and do what's necessary to make your voice heard. But don't pretend the world's out to get you. That's something the political left pushes hard. Just be equal and do what everyone else does. That's how freedom and equality work.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Decoded.
Yeah, but only if you say something ridiculously stupid that I have to demonstrate the idiocy of, which I guess is pretty much a guarantee. Now, you can find racism anywhere along the political spectrum, but nowhere is it as concentrated and as clueless as among the political left. They're not even aware of how racist they are on a daily basis. They continually try to redefine what they consider racism so they don't look as bad as the people they try to smear. Sometimes those people deserve it. Most of the time they don't. They don't hate people on the basis of their race. They want everyone to be equally accountable. And the liberals want none of that. They want to keep the poor down, so they keep casting votes for the Democrats. They really don't care what happens to these people. They care if they keep getting elected. And when you see cities that are absolute disasters for the poor, and especially for the poor blacks, who invariably runs those cities? Well, the Democrats, of course. And that's something to think about, isn't it? 24/7 Wall Street made a list of the worst cities to be black in America. Top on that list is Milwaukee, which hasn't had a Republican mayor since 1908. Second is Rockford, Illinois, which hasn't had Republican leadership since 1911. Third is Minneapolis-St. Paul, which really hasn't had a Republican mayor since 1961. Are we seeing a pattern here? I mean, Chicago, which everyone uses to complain about how many black deaths there are, has been firmly in Democratic hands since 1931. So if the political left actually cares about these people, why are the places that they control so awful for blacks? That's something to consider, isn't it? Because people like Franchesca Ramsey will never, ever think about it. Ask yourself why.